blooded. We are able to keep our blood at our own temperature, which is why when they take your temperature, you're sick. If it's not 98.6, it means your body is fighting off an organism or there's something else going on. Cold-blooded creatures cannot maintain their own temperature. So when it gets cold out, insects die, except for the honeybees. Have you guys seen the movie Happy Feet? You know when all the penguins were huddling together for warmth? Bees actually do that throughout the winter too. So if you see a box, a hive, covered with snow, the queen will be at the middle of a cluster at about 92 degrees, even though it might be 10 below outside. And their ability to work together to heat each other up and act as a community separates them from the rest of the insect world. There are some other social insects like ants, and they tend to be the most populous and the most successful insects around. Bees are also extremely intelligent. Their brains are actually denser than human brains, so they can, per amount, they can hold more material. It's still a very small brain, but in the insect world, they're the Einsteins. They can be trained, they can be taught to do different things. They're used in both, the military has used them and science has used them. I think Amanda will talk a little more about that.
I'm scared, Mommy. I want to go home.
Oh, am I boring you?
No, we didn't realize it was going to rain. We didn't talk about it.
One last thing, bees are very similar to butterflies in that they go through complete metamorphosis. So they're born as larvae, which will look like an inchworm, and then they will go into a cocoon, and from that cocoon they will emerge as an adult bee. So they have actually egg, larva, pupa, and then adult life. They have 4 very distinct phases of their life. So the bee's life cycle can basically be broken down into kind of 2 segments. From winter, as soon as the days start getting longer, they're building up for the summer and to make as much honey as possible. And we just had the summer solstice and the days are getting shorter. They're now declining toward the winter with the plan of how do I make it through the winter. Come the winter time, there's not enough food, there's no sources of food, so they can only survive on whatever honey they've produced. And they need a cluster big enough to keep them warm through the winter, but small enough that they don't eat through all their food. So right now, that hive probably has 40 to 50,000 bees in it. In the winter time, it'll probably be 10 to 15,000 bees. So one last thing we'll talk about is who knows what's inside. How many different types of bees are there in a colony? 2? 3? The answer is 3. Do you know what they are?
There's the honey bee, or the worker bee, drone, and queen bee.
Right. So the queen bee, female bee, she has one job, and that is to lay eggs. And she can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day. She can lay up to 200,000 in her life. She can live anywhere from 2 years to 5 years. She is the biggest bee and does nothing else. They feed her, they groom her, they take care of her. She leaves the hive generally once to mate, and she comes back and she does not leave again. Worker bees are all what sex?
I want to go to the
Sorry, I don't want to keep disturbing. Sorry.
So the worker bees are all female. Women do all the work in the hive. They're all their work is age dependent. They'll start off nurse bees. They'll work into sort of housekeeping bees. They might then take the nectar from foraging bees, and after about 3 weeks, they will move into outdoor bees. They'll guard the hive and they'll go out on foraging trips, and they'll do that until they literally work themselves to death. A female worker bee will live for about 40 days, depending on what's going on around her. So the queen is constantly laying eggs. They're constantly growing through the life cycle and dying.
About the mating, so you said she leaves the hive once to mate, and that one time is sufficient to produce 200,000 eggs?
Yes.
mates with multiple drones.
Okay.
So the males do nothing. Their only goal in life is to mate with the queen. And they are taken care of by all the females, and they go out in the springtime looking for queens, or all summer long. When it comes to the fall, the worker bees will kick all the males out, and they will all die because they don't want to feed them over the winter. There's no use for them.
That's actually something should learn.
Take over payments?
And as Amanda said, when she goes out to mate, she will mate 10 to 15 times, and that will explain why you will see a lot of different types of bees within one colony, as they're all from the same mother but from different fathers, and that's why she lives longer. Any female egg can become a queen. After 2 days, if the larva's diet changes. If it's a worker bee, it goes to more honey and pollen. If it's a queen, they give her a special diet, which is called
Royal jelly?
the royal jelly. And she gets royal jelly her whole life. And the royal jelly triggers some triggers some proteins inside her. She develops fully as a female bee. She grows to be about 2 times the size, or 3 times the size of a regular bee, and she lives for up to 5 years. So the royal jelly works wonders on her.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
See how much effect food has on the growth, right?
All right, I'm going to let Amanda talk a little bit about sort of what a bee looks like and how to tell it apart from a wasp.
Okay, does anybody know how many segments a bee has? No? Yes. A bee has 3 body segments: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. The head is used for sensory. Does anybody know which one is the most important sense? Sight, sound, smell? Yep, it's smell. Believe it or not, a bee has a better sense of smell than a dog, and they're used to sniff out bombs in the army. The head, in the head, there's 2 antennae for touch and smell. There's 5 eyes, believe it or not, 2 on the side and 3 on the top of its head, and then mouth and mandibles for chewing. Then there's the thorax for the motion. That's where all of the motion is located. 6 legs and all the 4 wings are all located on the middle section. Then there's the abdomen, where all the organs and systems and the stinger is located. Now, to tell apart a bee from a wasp, there's one main difference, and that is what they eat. Bees are vegetarians and wasps are carnivores. So because they have different diets, their bodies form differently so they can get the diet that they need. Does anybody know which one's the bee and which one's the wasp?
The wasp is high one.
Correct. At the end, I'll test you to see which ones, see if you know which one's a bee and which one's a wasp. Okay. There's 4 main ways that you could tell apart a bee from a wasp. Number 1, bees have hair on their bodies so they can collect all the pollen, and wasps have smooth bodies so they can fly through the air faster. Another one is bees have much larger legs so they can store more pollen, whereas wasps have thinner, spindly legs so they can grab onto their prey. Another reason is bees are much larger so they can store nectar, kind of like a truck, whereas wasps are skinnier and thinner so they can fly through the air, kind of like a race car. The final reason is wasp, you could see the connection between the different, like the head and the thorax and the abdomen, called the wasp's place, whereas bees, you can't see the connection and it looks like one big segment. So to recap, there's 4 main reasons. Bees have hair, wasps don't. Bees have larger legs, wasps have thinner, spindly legs. Bees' body is bigger, like a truck, and and then wasps is thinner, like a race car. And you could see the waist in the wasp, whereas you can't with the bee. Now, is this a bee or a wasp? Yes, because you can see the waist, and it's much shinier and thinner. What about this one? Does anyone know what type of bee this is?
Bumblebee?
Yes, it's a bumblebee. What about this one?
Wasp.
Yes.
Wasps just look scarier to me.
And what about this one?
Wasp. Nice and fuzzy.
Yep, it's a bee. Because you can see the hair and the larger petal.
So when you're out and you see things flying around, a wasp is much more likely to sting you than a honeybee. Honeybee are what we would call defensive. If you attack its hive or it feels threatened, it will sting you. But a honeybee can only sting once. A worker bee can only sting once. Its stinger is barbed. It leaves its stinger in you. So when it leaves, it loses half of its abdomen and it cannot survive. So honeybees, again, will not sting you unless they're really, unless you provoke them. Wasps will be happy to sting you unprovoked, and they can sting you multiple times. So it is good to know that, to be able to tell the difference between the two. And if you hear, you can generally even detect their flight. Bees tend to fly around a little bit more like a hovercraft, a little bit more bumbly. The wasps are darting much faster, much more like an attack creature. So we talked a little bit about a queen. This is the, you can see the queen in the middle next to a worker bee. She is significantly larger. You know, one of the things we do when we open up a hive is we look for the queen to make sure that the queen is there. We don't always find her because you can imagine with all these bees running around trying to pick out that one bee out of 40 frames is sometimes difficult. But as long as we see, you'll notice in the side there, all those little white donuts, those are actually the larvae. So as long as we see the larva, we know that she must have been there within the last 5 days. And if I've got my glasses on and I can spot eggs, then I know she's been there within the last 3 days because the eggs hatch in 3 days. So this is a picture similar to what the frame that we have in the observation hive. And in this frame, you can see a number of things. You can see honey in a corner, capped honey. You can see uncapped honey that's glistening. You can see uncapped white cells where there's larvae. And then all of these cap cells here are regular worker bees. Now you see these larger ones that look like bullets. Those are actually the male or the drone cells. The males are bigger than the females, and they're very distinctive. The males are also what they would call haploid. They only have a half a set of genes. They are an unfertilized egg that the queen has laid. And we'll see if you are good, you'll be able to pick the one male bee that's on this picture. There's one bee that is
You shouldn't do anything, right?
Yeah, I should be lazy.
Is that right here?
that is the one male bee. He is designed a little bit differently. His eyes cover his whole head because actually when they mate in air. So he's got nothing but eyes and sensors to try and find his mate.
And there's no stinger, right?
There is no stinger in a male bee, correct. I don't think we have any male bees here. We're getting a little late in the season. They may be on some of the other frames, but these are primarily all workers. There is no queen in here, so they will become more agitated, probably because of the weather and the fact that they don't smell the queen. Yeah, there are a few drone cells in there, so some drone are still going to be hatching, so feel free to come take a look. Any questions about anything that we've covered? Anything that you want to know about bees?
How many bees are inside of there?
there's one frame here, and there's 5 more frames down below. I would guess there's probably about 1,000, maybe 2,000.
What do you do when the population gets too large for the hive or the queen dies?
2 questions there. She asked what happens if the queen dies and what happens if the population gets too large. So I told you there's superorganisms. So the queen just producing more bees doesn't generate a new colony. And so at some point the colony wants to make 2 colonies. And that's sort of our spring presentation, because in the springtime as they're growing up, the one other time the queen will leave is if they think there's enough food and nectar around, the queen will leave with half the bees, and they'll raise a new queen in the old hive with the old half of the bees. And now there are 2 colonies that will grow up. And then if the queen dies, if they have an egg that's less than 3 days old, they will take that egg and raise up a new queen. If they don't have any eggs in the hive that are less than 3 days old, they're in trouble. So, we're going to do a honey taste test, but first I'm going to tell you a little bit about honey. Do you guys know how honey is made? Yes, no? Sometimes teachers will refer to honey as bee bark.
Yeah.
Because what happens is the bee will go out and get the bee will go out and collect nectar from the flowers, and it will store it in what is called a honey stomach or a honey crop. It's before its regular digestive system, so it hasn't actually gone in. They have this pre-stomach that's purely to store nectar. And while it's there, it mixes with enzymes, which is the secret sauce of honey, and it also breaks down the fructose. Fructose is a complex sugar, and it divides the sucrose into 2 simple sugars. So that's why honey is considered sweeter, because one complex sugar will bind with 1 sugar receptor, 2 will bind with 2. So it actually is becoming twice as sweet as the nectar or the fructose that it originated from. So it goes into the honey crop, mixes with the enzymes and the secret sauce, comes back to the hive, and it will then essentially regurgitate it or pass it on to another bee, which puts it into one of these cells. Now, do you know what happens when you take water and sugar and leave it out? It generally ferments. That's how you can make alcohol or wine. So the bees actually have to dehydrate that nectar down until the water content is below 19%. So when you look in here, you can actually see some uncapped cells that are glistening. That's nectar that's not ready yet. Once the bees say it's ready, they'll put a wax cap over it. So as a beekeeper, if I pull up a frame and it's all covered with wax, that honey is ready to harvest. If it's not all covered, then we need to put it back and let the bees work on it some more.
So how long does it usually take them to fan the moisture out?
On an individual, I don't know, on a cell-by-cell basis. So this is a frame, and the bees will make the beeswax in all these individual cells. And these cells are where they will then lay the eggs, they will store pollen, they will store the nectar and the honey, and this is basically the rooms of their house. If you guys want to touch it, pass it around, feel free. So, where do you think honey gets its flavor?
Flower or
From the nectar. So will all honeys taste the same? No, it'll depend upon what flowers they have. So, as an example, this is one of our honeys that we harvested last year, and this is buckwheat honey. Buckwheat is very dark. It almost tastes like molasses. This is our darker honey. We had a very light honey that and I think our honey tastes fairly floral. Very, very, very different from this.
Is the sole purpose of honey to feed the bees?
Sole purpose of honey is so the honey's diet, the bee's diet is honey and pollen. Pollen is its source of protein. Protein's needed to build the bee's body. So when the adult bee comes out, its main diet then is honey. Honey is pure carbohydrates, it's energy. So in the wintertime, they will eat the honey and actually shake their flight muscles with the wings detached to generate heat inside the hive. So they will slowly move up the hive, eating all the honey that they have stored, and hopefully
Just
by
to
the,
keep warm.
to
basically.
keep warm and keep the queen warm. But hopefully by the time they get to the top, it's spring, and they can go out and find some nectar. If they get to the top, and bees are not very good, even though there's honey to the side of them, they're not very good in the winter of moving laterally. They basically will just move straight up. So, you know, if you get a bunch of cold days and they set well, and then in December, say, you know, or Thanksgiving, it becomes 60 degrees, and they go out flying, and they come back and make a cluster up and a box higher. Now they're just going to go up one box, and it's the warm time in November and December that's very tough on the bees because they can't find anything yet they're flying around. And if you think about it, imagine putting on a 60-pound backpack and running up a hill. A bee will carry its own weight in nectar. Oh, you don't have to do it, I'm sorry, that's just the women who have to do that. But they will carry their own weight and fly back and forth, which is really amazing. So in the wintertime when there's nothing out there, they're flying, which is very aerobic. It's worse than running, using up energy, coming back eating honey. So warm Decembers, warm Januaries are tough on bees. So who wants to taste some honey? Anybody?
Everyone does.
This is the first honey. Take one out. You can just roll it around, spin it around. Does it taste like the honey you usually eat?
Somewhat different.
No.
It's more sweeter.
Light and dark depends on the season, right?
It's a lot sweeter.
Or
Light and dark is primarily based on the nectar it comes from. There are some people who say if you leave the honey in the hive longer, it will darken over time. That honey will sort of age. I don't know whether that is true. Can you take one out?
Are these?
Those are two. So, what did you think of that honey?
it's not that sweet.
Better than my own.
Semi-sweet. No? No, it's not
See what you think of it. Different?
Yeah.
Oh,
Why is it different?
why not?
How is it different?
It's a lot sweeter. It's sweeter.
This one's sweeter, right?
Maybe.
This one is sweet.
I would rather have this honey. They're all sweet. It's honey. Is that the one that came right out of the bee?
They all are.
Oh my goodness. That is very different.
It is.
Very different.
Can I have the very different one?
So is that
I think this one is yours.
Second purple. No.
Nice, could you tell the difference between the two or not?
Nope. Really? Yeah, I can. There's a big difference. Can I get the sweeter? You already got the sweeter. You need more of the sweeter. Sonia, which one do you like better?
It reminds me of this big social experiment
I like the
where
first one.
people were getting 5 or 6 different kinds, and they had like this elaborate conversations about how one was so much better. And in the end, turned out they were all from the same garden.
That's better than the wine.
Seriously.
Wait, what happened?
So the first one you tried was a store-bought honey, which means it's probably primarily clover. Most of the store-bought honey comes from North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming. They take them out to California to pollinate the almonds in January, February, and then they bring them back. And I mean, hundreds of thousands of colonies are out there, and they reside mostly on clover. And that's your traditional honey flavor. The other one was ours, and you get it. It's a much more floral, lighter honey.
Also, the pollen content, you kind of, I think, can taste the difference too. No?
I don't know. You know, theirs may go through a slightly finer filter than mine does, so they may have less pollen. But mine goes through a pretty small filter, so most of the pollen is taken out. And this is the third one.
It sort of tastes like store-bought honey. It's like store-bought, right? That was just the same. Well, no, it's like store-bought.
It's like
I knew that my mom would do.
Yeah. Oh yes.
What? Wait, Mom. Are we still doing the scavenger hunt? Of course. Like, it's only me, Kata, Nisha, and Jumbo.
That's enough. And then the house, you want to join us for scavenger hunt? Which is interesting.
we have a very, very good prize.
And maybe some
Good
adults
job,
would be
sticker.
interested.
Nope. What? It's actually not. You know what it is?
And the prize is really good.
Don't say anything about the prize.
Tell me about the prize.
No. It's a big secret.
Too late. Wait, what? Oh, I guess.
Wait, what is it?
I'm not telling you.
What did you think of the third one?
So good. I think you're good with the secret.
Nope.
So, honey tasting is very subjective. You know, there are some people who may love the clover. The second one was ours, which I think is a little more floral. This is palmetto honey from Florida. It's considered to be one of their better ones. If you do travel around, especially if you go to Florida or California, you can pick up local honey. Sage honey is supposed to be very good. There's orange blossom. I'm not as big a fan on the orange blossom one. There's a deadwood that comes out of the Appalachian area. That's supposed to be very good. So again, if you're traveling around and you get a chance to buy the local honey, you're going to get something that tastes different than what you can get in the store.
What do you think about the honey which are sold in the store, but it's like from Germany? Would you buy Honey from
wait,
Germany, United States.
there's some Australian honey that's supposed to have additional health benefits based on the tree that it comes from. And I find most of the honey that I've tried from Europe is thicker and much stronger than American honey. I personally don't like it, but as much. I like the lighter honey, so that's my preference. So I would tend to probably not buy it if I had a choice to buy something else. But again, if you like the heavier, fuller flavored honey, that's what it's going to be like.
But in terms of like health benefits, you think it's better to buy a local?
Honey, as long as it's 100% pure honey, and you typically are sure, if you're getting local, you're probably getting 100% pure honey.
If you have allergies.
If you get allergies, if
Local honey would be better.
you know, they've done some tests, and even people who have pasteurized the honey, put it through heat, it apparently still does not lose any of the health benefits you get from it. So you know, there is a lot of honey, artificial honey that comes from China, Eastern Asia, and they'll pass it through other countries, and that tends not to be real honey. It's probably more sugar water colored
Okay,
and
how to
flavored.
determine?
Well, you can, unless you're buying from a company that's reputable, yeah, if you know the name, and based on the price. If it's $1.50 for a pound, it's probably not real honey.
But real honey, local real honey, comes from the flowers that are around us, so chemically they're probably close to our body needs and compositions based on just chemical.
I know Manuka honey has living probiotics in it as well. That's like one of the medicinal benefits besides.
That's the
manuka
ones
honey that it's
From
used
Australia.
only on nutrients.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. But that, if you do use it medicinally, you should never just put Manuka honey in like a cup of tea, because then you're killing those probiotic enzymes. So there's that whole thing. If you're gonna go the route of Manuka honey, but otherwise I agree. Local
Yeah.
honey is amazing because you get all of the immunities if you're allergic. Yeah.
Which tree?
Manuka?
Tea trees.
Tea
What
tree?
Manuka honey
Yeah.
is.
Manuka honey is also
But
rated based
but
on some-
yeah, the problem is, even with that honey, is it's generally more expensive, which means you get people knocking it off with things and claiming it's Manuka. So you know, if you're not buying it in Australia from a source you know, you're not 100% sure you're getting the health benefits anyway.
And the price depends a lot on that rating system. You know how they have that factor on the label?
All 16 or
Yeah. The higher it is, the more expensive it is, because it's in the rating system is very subjective to of certain flaws with it. I don't know if you read about it. I think they recently reclassified the whole thing.
It's interesting on the pollen and the helping with the allergies. A lot of people swear that when they take honey every day, a teaspoon a day of local honey, it does help them and they have less allergies. You know, from a scientific standpoint, your allergies are coming from the wind-blown pollen, not the pollen that's required. The bees are going out to pollinate, because the whole purpose of the bee is to pollinate plants that are not wind-blown pollinated. And actually, bees, you know, their eyesight is different from ours. Their spectrum of colors, they cannot see red, but they can see ultraviolet. And if you shine ultraviolet on some of the flowers that are trying to attract bees, there's like arrows saying "eat here," so the bees can fly over and see, there's my dinner. So it's the bees and the honey and the flowers have actually worked together. The flowers need the bees more, and so they're like, here, I've got nectar, come here, have the nectar, and the pollination is the side benefit.
So do you think that having or helping the allergies is kind of just a myth then?
I don't know. I haven't seen an actual study that has proven it, but there are a lot of people who swear by it.
Yeah.
It's hard to scientifically explain why it would be working unless you know, the local floral somehow affects the immune system,
Or
and
it's just so high in nutrients and vitamins. And
Yeah.
What's the difference? Like in some of the bottles in the stores, it says 100% honey or raw honey. What's like the difference?
Raw?
Yeah.
I assume, I mean, honey is honey. You don't do anything to honey. Honey has antibiotic properties. You know, so when you take it off the hive, strain it, it's good to go. As long as you cap it, it's going to last forever. They pull honey out of the tombs, it's still good honey. So it doesn't go bad. Some people do, as I say, heat the honey. My guess is it's more of the people, I mean, this one says raw, but my guess is more of the big producers. When you heat it, I think it kind of melts the flavor a little bit, so it's more of a consistent product. I found, you know, when we cut off the wax, there'll be some drippings, and when we melt that wax down, the wax and the honey will separate. And I still use that honey for myself, and I find that honey, it's still good, but it's lost some of the floralness that you get before you heat it.
But the temperature in the hive, how high does it get up to usually? Because I know someone who worked with the bees in South America. He said the honey in the hive gets up to really high temperature, so the whole controversy here about honey not being heated over like 90-something% to be considered raw is because in the hive sometimes it gets hotter than that. I'm not sure about here if that's still...
The issue you have, if they're a brood, that brood is got to be kept basically between 90 and 95. So if it's colder out, they will heat it, and you'll see the bees covering it, keeping it warm, which in the springtime, you know, when it's 60 degrees at night, the bees take a while to build up because they can't lay more eggs than bees. They have to cover them and keep them warm.
Yeah.
So they have to lay them, and once they hit a critical mass, then they explode. And if it gets too hot, they will fan them. So the brood is the limiting issue, not the honey. So they could be fanning, keeping this cool, and the honey up above it may be hotter, but I'd be surprised if it gets over 105 degrees in a hive. Now they have a new product out. There is what's killing the bees primarily is a varroa mite. It's a little tick. It's a vector. It transfers diseases to the bee, and they have a new product that basically a solar heater that you put on top, and it heats up the hive supposedly to a temperature that kills the mites but not the bees. I haven't seen the research on it. I know it just came out, so I don't know how effective it is. If it does kill the mites, it'll be great, because it is, if you do not treat your hive for mites, the hive will die, essentially. So anybody who says their hive is completely free of anything. I mean, we use naturally occurring. We basically put formic acid in, or oxalic acid, or thiamol, which is a derivative from the thyme plant, all of which occur naturally in nature. But again, it's put in as a miticide. So you know, anyone says that they're 100% natural, their hive will not survive. It just can't these days. The mite is present everywhere.
It's a matter of routine maintenance in our area.
Yes. The two hives that I had die over last winter were the two that I did not treat. The four that I treated survived. Does anyone know why you do not feed honey to infants?
Allergies?
Too much sugar?
It can get stuck in their throat.
The issue is that bees go out and collect pollen and nectar, and botulism is a naturally occurring what is it? It's a naturally occurring fungus that they will inadvertently collect as they're collecting their pollen and nectar. And not, I'm sure 99% of the honey collected does not have botulism in it, but the antibacterial properties of honey do not affect the spores of botulism. So they will survive in honey and at a very minute amount, but the undeveloped digestive system of an infant cannot process that. And so one child probably died at one point in time, so they put a warning label on. I'm sure many people now feed their infants honey with absolutely no problem, but that is the risk that you run.
Actually, isn't it also possible with the can?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the risk probably is much higher with that.
I'm in. Yeah. It used to be much higher. I don't know when the last case of can developed botulism was, but it's not as prevalent as it was 40 years ago, 50 years ago. But that is the risk. Any other questions? Well, hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something.
Thank you
Hope
so much.
you'll go out and buy local honey.